How are you guys doing? Had a good conference so far? Good to see still a lot of people attending all the talks we have on testing and mobile quality. We've had a theme which wasn't actually very deliberate, but I'm really happy about it because the theme is really a focus on mobile quality and continuous integration and even continuous delivery. So this talk will be an experience report from a team that's been doing mobile testing for some time now and doing it quite successfully. And as you can see, this guy is not me. This is Niels from eBay in Denmark. I've known him for some time. In fact, before he was working at eBay, I was doing some consulting and mobile consulting. I was Objective-C iOS programmer, and I worked together with Niels on one of the larger Danish mobile banking apps. And I'll tell you a small story about that because it tells you a bit about kind of where we've been with mobile quality and maturity, and kind of where we're going. So back then we were working on this mobile banking app for one of the largest banks in Denmark, and things were working pretty well. We're delivering this app. We were stressing out about this upcoming release, and we're doing a lot of testing. And I think we did a decent job of testing it. But a week before we had to release it, I was going on a vacation because things were looking good. We're on time. Things are good. And I went on a vacation, on a skiing trip to Switzerland. So I was at the top of a mountain in Switzerland, and I got this call from the team. They said, "Okay, so we got to ship it to App Store. How we do it?" And I realized that I was the only person on the team that had the necessary configuration and scripting and provisioning to actually ship this app to the App Store. And we had this deadline. We had to ship it. So I was literally at the top of a Swiss mountain with a bad Wi-Fi, shipping to App Store, and it took like 3 hours uploading the binary. Now, you don't want that kind of risk, because we're going to launch this thing, and we had marketing campaigns that were going to hit at a specific date, so we really wanted to nail this. So that's just one story. The other story I just wanted to mention briefly, just to make sure that he doesn't do it, because it's kind of embarrassing, is that back then Niels was actually pushing test-driven development way before I kind of got it. So I was like, I see the value of tests, but yeah, we can write some tests. We can also not do it. He was really pushing it, and that's been following ever since. I think that's why he's presenting this today. So I'm really happy to have him here. I'll just do a very brief, setting the stage, and then Niels is the primary person speaking here. So really, continuous delivery to me is a theme of this conference. So you all know this guy, right? Martin Fowler. He's like a software guru. So he says that continuous delivery is a software development discipline where you build your software in such a way that it can be released to production at any time. So how many in here feel that mobile, web, whatever, feel that they have software where if you take any point in time on the master branch, can release the software to production? Show of hands. Yes. So we're getting there, but not many hands are showing there. And it takes a lot to actually implement this. But it's an industry trend. It's happening, particularly in the web space. Like companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and as you'll hear, also eBay are doing this in the web space, at least, or other spaces. I'm not going to go into the details of the benefits of that. Niels will cover that. But generally, it's associated with more predictable releases, more frequent releases, and higher quality. However, for mobile, it does pose a challenge. There are some reasons why it's hard to do for mobile. First of all, the App Store distribution model makes it hard to actually continuously distribute your products to your users. But even if you can't do that, just being in a position where if the App Store distribution model would have allowed it, you would in principle be able to push a button and you would ship to App Store. That has a lot of value, even if you're not going to do it. There are a bunch of other reasons why realizing this in mobile is tough. One of them being tooling. That's something we are working on changing, and I think Niels will testify that we're getting there. Also, to be confident that your app will function on the devices of your users, you need to do device testing, which is also complicated to do in terms of continuous delivery. And that's also why we're building Test Cloud. I don't want to go into too much details here. I want to spend the time on Niels. But the one point I want to make is that continuous delivery is more than just a tooling question. So with our products and tools and services, we will try to help you on the tooling side and on the services side. So being able to write tests, run them across a large number of devices, we can do that. But the people and process side, which is needed to realize this in your organization, is up to you. And there are a lot of things that come into play there, which you'll hear from Niels. But one of them being break down the silos, start working cross-functional teams, potentially use behavior-driven development, which is kind of a communication tool where you write the behavior of your app in a human-readable language. And you use this to drive the automated tests that you're running. So in order just to set the stage for Niels, I need to just clarify something regarding Calabash and Xamarin UI Test. So those are similar tools. They're both supported in Xamarin Test Cloud. They can both run and test Xamarin apps. The differences are which language am I using to write the tests? For UI Test, it's C#. For Calabash, it's Ruby. And which executor am I using to drive the test? Is it NUnit for C# or is it Cucumber? And am I doing BDD, behavior-driven development? And which IDE am I using? But it's the same thing that's going on under the hood. Both are fully supported in Test Cloud and for running and testing Xamarin apps locally. So it's really depending on your taste. A quick description of the architecture of UI tests. So remember we had this situation where you have your host machine that's executing the test executing on your machine, talking HTTP to an agent that's running on the device or simulator. And that's the thing that's driving the automation. This is Xamarin UI test. Now, with Calabash, it's almost the same. The only difference is that you have these scenarios that are written in human-readable language. Given I'm on the login screen, I log in as Nat, then this should happen. This is understandable by everybody on the team. And that's the BDD aspect of this. And the way you connect that and make it an automated test is you put a small layer of Ruby code that will translate these sentences into executable code. From there on, it's the same story. So you have Cucumber executing these, interpreting these human understandable phrases as blocks of Ruby code. And then from there on, we have the same automation going on with the Test Cloud agent. So just to give you an overview, what's Calabash, what's UI test? Now we at Xamarin, we develop Calabash and we develop UI test. So we have kind of full control of the stack and full control of the integrations with Test Cloud. Okay, quick rundown. So now I'd like to invite Niels to the stage to give you his stories. Please give him a hand.
Thank you. I think Karl forgot to mention the conclusion on that second story he was telling when I was pushing for more test-driven development, because we were in a meeting, and, well, I should tone down the language a bit, but he actually at one point said, well, screw the tests, with different words that were even worse. So, yeah, he came a long way, too. He already, well, introduced what I've been doing. I did some Android development in the bank as well, but mainly iOS. And for the past nearly 2 years, I've been with eBay in Denmark. And I joined a team that was already at that point using Calabash. And ever since then, the tools has evolved a lot, and so has our use of it, which is what I want to highlight today. So when I talk to people from other companies who really wanted, well, we talk about automating the whole test phase. It all comes down to two excuses why they're not doing it. One being that tools are simply just too complicated to use. I think we've already seen today that's really not the case anymore. And the other one is that, yeah, we really want to get started with this, but we have this release coming up, so we don't really have time to start. And, well, I think the question should be, how can you afford not to be doing this, which I hopefully can show you guys. Just to set the context, so I'm with eBay Classifieds in Denmark, and we're a small mobile team. We have two apps that we are maintaining and developing. One is called DBA. It's a classified site where you can sell your dog and your wife and everything else in between. And the other one is a Bilbasen, which is a motor site where you go to find your next car and find new cool models and all this. And I put in a few numbers, so they're highly used in the Danish market. But the interesting part is that mobile traffic has now surpassed the web traffic on both platforms. So we are one team doing these two apps, and then we have a web team for each. So there's one web team doing the DBA app, the DBA website, and one doing the Bilbasen website. And they can deploy like once or twice a week. And we have to keep up with those guys because we don't want to lose any features. People expect they have full features on the mobile devices as well. So we're kind of busy, and that's why we're so focusing on doing this automation, because it's really going to speed up the whole development cycle. So whenever I refer to being a part of the team, this is it. Those are the numbers. We have the Scrum Master who keeps control of all the stakeholders, the product owner, and UX and design, so they don't come interrupt us at all times. And then we are just the core team. What's interesting is that we have a QA expert as part of the team. It's not something we hand it over to a different department and expect them to make sure that we deliver quality. It's our responsibility as a team. We want to have the full circle. So that's just setting the context. Now, to get started automating anything, we first need to write the tests. And that's an interesting thing, too, to go from the story to a running test, because we don't want to wait until right before we ship, as Nat mentioned this morning as well. We want to do it all the time as soon as we are writing the story. So we have a nice groomed backlog, and whenever our product owner wants to introduce a new story, they'll present it, and we'll ask a lot of questions, mainly to understand the accept criteria, so we know how much to do before we're actually done with this. And so we do this on a regular basis to get the backlog ready. And then we enter into a sprint, and this is where all the good parts are happening, because I'll pick a story and start working on it, and I'll write the whole implementation, and also the test at this time. And I'm not only talking about UI test here. We have unit test and integration test as well, because some tests are just easier to do at those lower levels. If I want to make sure that I get the right JSON back, I'll do it in my integration test where I'm actually talking to the server. It's too much work to validate every single field on the UI, so it's a lot easier to do that in integration tests. But I'll be writing all these tests and the story, and when all my tests are green and everything is working, I'll go and ask another team member to review my code and the tests. Also, the code coverage that we have, I'll come back to that later to make sure that we are thinking the quality of the tests are really good as well. And we also do a little bit of manual testing here, just because humans are better at exploratory testing than machines are. So this is where this quality test is going on. I might get a feedback, so we go around in a circle a little bit. And then when we all agree this story is ready, well, then it's ready to be shipped. So it's on our master branch now, and we can upload it, like Karl said, at any time someone decides it's a good time to ship to the App Store. So this is working really well when it's just me working on one story, but we were multiple members of the team, so they're working on separate stories that might need changes in the same code base. So that's where we have this continuous integration coming in. I don't know if you guys went to Greg's talk right before this. He had a lot of details on the continuous integration part. So we are using Jenkins on a couple of Mac Minis, and we run the test, first the unit test. If they pass, we'll continue with the integration test, and only if they pass as well, we'll run all the UI tests. We do only run our UI test in the simulator on our build server. We haven't connected any physical devices. For that, we trust the Xamarin cloud, as I'll come back to later. And after each commit, we only run a subset of our tests. Otherwise, it will take too long, which we'll see later as well. But at nighttime, we do run the whole test suite just to make sure that we're still full covered. And so this is a beautiful picture of the team, well, almost the entire team. But what's more interesting is the green build monitor above us. And this one is really visible in the whole office. So you can always see if someone messed up the code, and we have a red build. So we want to keep this one green all the time. We don't believe in feedback in mails, because you'll just get sick of it and create a little rule, and it will go to a folder that you never look. So we have to keep it visible at all times. Yeah, so that's it. Now we're running continuously with the test we just wrote, and we're all good. And focusing on this has really improved everything. Well, everything is a big word, but I do believe it has. So preparing for this talk, I went back in the App Store and looked at how many releases we have actually been doing, and I tried to make a timeline. So this is what it looks like looked like last year. Above the timeline is the DBA, the Classifieds app, and at the bottom is the Motors app. I can mention that prior to the 2.0 release in February, prior to that was back in October 12, so it actually took us 4 months to prepare 2.0, and no Bilbasen apps were released at that time. Not that high a speed compared to a website that can deploy multiple times a week. And now you notice the two blue bubbles. Up until then, we were only available on iPhone, so that's where we went into doing universal apps. And so suddenly, we kind of doubled the whole test effort because you had to test on the iPad as well. We knew our tests weren't that well structured, so we refactored. You see a little error in the summertime. We refactored our whole test suite into using page objects, which I'll come back to later as well. So by the end of the year, we were running on iPhone and iPad. And even then, this year, we managed to step up the releases. And we thought we were really rocking the boat. Everything was just going well. We could release each app every month. And then you might notice these little purple ones. That's where I think went a little bit wrong. But it's OK. There should be enough room for doing a little bit of failures as well. So we had to get some bug fixes out right away. One of the issues were that we had a bad bug in a place where we didn't have a UI test. So after we fixed the bug, we also added a UI test to make sure it couldn't happen again. And the two others were actually kind of interesting, because we had a deal on the team that we should always make sure to test on both iOS 6 and 7 at this time. And apparently, 2 times in a row almost, we forgot to test small specific features on iOS 6, mainly because we thought we hadn't changed anything that could break it. So if we at this time had been running in the Xamarin Test Cloud, we would have caught them because we could specify multiple devices. And we are human beings, so we tend to forget things. That's why, again, we want to automate all this. So I said it has improved everything, not only being able to ship faster, but the whole development cycle. Again, early last year, we did very limited refactoring, simply because the risk was too high. Nobody dared to go in and change anything, because that will, you should see our QA expert, her eyes would start rolling if we said, well, I fixed a little thing over here. And she knew that meant she would have to test like basically the whole app one more time. Huge effort for every little change we made. And many bugs were actually not found until much later, which is really expensive to fix by then. So that meant we had 2 apps with lots of legacy code. And if you go back to the first bullet, you can't get rid of the legacy code because you don't really dare to refactor. So all in all, we were in a kind of a bad circle at this time. But by now, when we have all these nice tests covering our bot, so to speak, now we can actually plan refactoring in larger areas. Like taking a story, we have to add a new feature over here. It's legacy code. We'll add a couple of more story points and make sure we almost rewrite the whole thing. And on a daily basis, we can do this Boy Scout cleanup, making sure we fix things so we don't have these code smells in the app or in the source code. And now most bugs are found immediately after commit, which is really nice. And this also gives time for our QA resource to focus on much better things than doing this boring regression test. She can now help identify critical business areas so we know where the risk is high and we have to put more attention, and help finding all these crazy bugs. I mean, when you go into the basement, there's no network, and you triple tap a button while you swing your iPad around, those things you don't want to automate them. You just want to make sure it doesn't happen. And so this is what we can now spend more time on. So I took in a small project example. We did this past summer. In the Motors app, we basically changed the heart of it, which is being able to specify what kind of car you want, the brand, the model, the price, the mileage, all these criteria. They were hard-coded in the app, and which is not really that cool, but they were at the time. And so we were falling behind the websites because they could change and add new criteria dynamically. There's new kind of gas you can put on and all this. And we had to ship a new app every time this changed. So now we are meta-driven from the server, telling us what criteria and what options for each criteria, and also the values. So the state comes from the server now. Quite a huge change for this app, but the test effort, and this is really nice, I believe, was about 1 full day of testing, well, split into different days because we would have to fix a few bugs every now and then. But most scenarios were already covered with UI tests. So the manual testing focused on well, network timings, because we were now much more dependent on the server, and also comparing results with the website, because up until then we haven't really been fully aligned with the website, giving the same results. You could do one search on the iPad, another on the website, and they won't be exactly the same. That was part of this project too, to fix it, and you couldn't really automate that, checking out the website at the same time. So that's where the manual tests were focusing. And no serious bugs were found. We shipped prior to what was planned and didn't find any serious bugs. So that was a really great example that, well, we already knew we were on the right path, but it kind of, we could pat ourselves on the shoulder and saying, hey, this is actually working the way we always claimed it would. So that's the whole development part of it. But also when it comes to releases, even though it's cool to be able to release from a mountaintop in Switzerland, you might want to be able to do it other places as well, and especially not spend as much time as we did at one point. So again, early last year, the entire team could get together for, depending on the size of the release, 2 to 5 days, and doing test run. We will call in customer supports and other people to come help test. They'll find some really serious bugs this late. We thought we were actually ready to ship it. We'll go back and fix it, do another big test run, because now we messed with a lot of code, find a few more bugs, and eventually we would be able to ship it. This overhead was well known, so this also meant that we cranked a lot of features into every release, because we want to do as little of this as possible. And now, well, this has changed too. Actually, we can now upload whenever the tests are green, which of course they should be all the time. And this actually, well, now it's feeling like we are agile in this process as well. Because now the product owner has the flexibility to change her mind. She might be glad after a sprint is done that, hey, these features you already added, they're really cool. Let's get them out and get some feedback from the customers. And we'll be, OK, we'll add 1 story point for the next sprint for doing the upload. And that's it. Then we're ready to upload. Sometimes our QA insists that we do a 1-hour manual test run just for her to feel safe as well. But bugs are really rarely found at this point. Well, the only downside to all this, as I see it, is that in early last year, for those long test runs, we used to get a lot of candy and Coke for doing this hard work. And there's no real time for that anymore. But that's about the only downside I can find. Yeah. So I'll be showing a little demo. First, just running one of the tests from the Bilbao snap, just so you guys can see that Karl is telling the truth when he said that the cucumber style works as well. And also, I haven't mentioned it, but our apps are made natively, and we're using Xcode, app code, and we're doing it in Objective-C. No Xamarin Studio in here. And then we'll have a little look at our continuous integration server and the test cloud. So I'll put this guy into presentation mode so you can read it. Yeah, so one thing you will notice is we're only on the Danish market with these apps, so all the blue strings in here, it's in Danish. The rest, that's because the UI is in Danish. But this thing, or this test, is going to do a search, put all kind of criteria in, and make sure we can find the car, and then reset all the search criteria and do another search. And I'll be running it on the iPad, but if I wanted to with a single change in an environment file, I could easily run it the exact same test on the iPhone. Oh, and here, whoops, there he comes. Whoops, sorry. I think my resolution is, OK, you can see most of it. So I'm in the market for a new Audi in this price range in Danish. Cars are really expensive in Denmark. Actually, if you notice the leasing thing, the last one of the switch boxes, that's a new search criteria they just added recently, dynamically, because they just tell us it's a it's a Boolean switch, and we know how to render it. Prior to this big change, we would have to ship an app to be able to get that one out there. So that's it. It could actually run. That was kind of a luck. So to our Jenkins server, well, right now it's green. I checked in earlier, and there was a whole build queue because it's late night in Denmark, so that's where we put Jenkins to work a lot. He likes to work when we go home. You'll see a lot of green, but there's also some red. I did actually notice that they should be working in Denmark now because our master is actually red. But I found out why, and that's another important point I want to make. That is caused by our test environment on the server side missing. Our search engine is not re-indexed right now, so you have to make sure that even though all your tests are running stable, so should your test environment where all the server side should be as well. So let's go back up to the top where it appears that the Bilbasen are really the green part here. So let's dive into the iPad. We haven't really talked about it much, but to ensure quality of your test, there's only actually one way to know that you're testing what you expect to test, and that's code coverage. So we actually do use that to check up on how we're doing on the different areas. You can go into a specific file and see what lines are hit and how many times. It's really useful. First of all, to control that you test what you believe you're testing, and also to get inspiration to writing the tests that you might be missing, but you thought you already had. So definitely highly recommended to set up code coverage once you start doing all this test automation to help verify that you're testing what you think you are. So we use actually quite the same like Greg said. We use our continuous integration for everything. You can see here is a little, is it large enough? Yeah. So we use it to upload to TestFlight for manual distribution to real devices. It's also Jenkins to upload to the test cloud. So here's the iPad part again. What you did see on the picture on the big monitor, we use this dashboard to run on the screen. It's just a free plugin for Jenkins. Now the screen size is not so good here with the writing, but it's just a quick overview, and then we can dive in and see what's wrong. These are feature builds, so it's okay for them to be read for a while, which I'll get back to later. But let's jump into our test cloud, and I'll head right to the Bilbasen app because we just saw a test we did there. And we are on the iPad. Right now, we're still experimenting how we want to use the test cloud. So they have a little feature called Series, and for the Bilbasen app, we have tried to split it both on iPad and iPhone so we can compare the images. So this is the iPad that we're going to see in here. And this is the exact same test that we just saw, the same steps. And you already seen a demo, but here you can easily see the UI changes between iOS 6 and 7, which is really neat. Not only do we now confirm that it's actually working on devices, we can also have our UX take a look at this and see that everything is the way he expected it to be. Really useful. Another cool feature Karl just showed me yesterday, because it's something new they just added, is actually down here for each step. I can use my arrows here. So you see the memory and CPU usage for each step that I go through. So this increase right here in memory usage probably has to do with the images we are loading on this page, and they are cached for a while. That's why it doesn't go down again. But it's really neat to be able to have these graphical ways to look at it while you see where we are in the app at that time. And I'm looking forward to get the playback version as well, because sometimes we do see failures in here that's hard to understand what actually did happen. So really awesome with this test cloud. And we do want to extend our use of it to use it even more with multiple features from both DBA and Bilbasen, because we don't want to maintain all those devices ourselves. And I mean, this is only on iOS. The fragmentation on Android is even bigger, so I can only see that's going to be even more helpful. All right. So yeah, that's where we are right now, but it took quite a while to get there. And well, calling them best practice because it's the way we do it might be, but these are lessons learned, so to speak. And there's going to be 5 of them that hopefully you guys can use as well if you aren't already doing it. The first one is you have to make sure you structure your test code well. And there's 2 parts of this. Actually, I'll go for the lower one first. We used to have a lot of sleeps, simply because we weren't smart enough to use the wait for, or maybe it was before there were a lot of wait for options actually available in the framework. So it was just easier to sleep for half a second or a second to get something done, or wait for it. Hopefully wait for it. Now we're using like a busy wait, so we have to wait until this element is present, or actually until another element is gone. And that has helped quite a lot. But the best part is using these page objects, and I think it's easier to just look at an example. And I should apologize, it's in Cucumber and Ruby because that's the way we do it, but you should be able to see what it would look like in C# as well. So here's a nice little test scenario. Now we're in the DBA app. I want to put something up for sale, and I should enter a price at the highlighted line right there. And this is what it looks like, where it looked like at one time. If you add that sleep together, it will sleep totally for 3 seconds while also doing some other stuff. And everything was implemented right here in this step, which meant that if we were to use this same step on Android and iPad and iPhone, well, then the logic might not be the same because the UI could have changed. It will equal out doing all the same logic in a test case in C#. You really want to take it one level up, the abstraction, and introduce these page objects. So the same step for setting the price would now look like this. So I just take the current page in the context and ask that page to write the price that is the input for this step. So this page is now just a Ruby class that knows how to handle this, like you see the screen on the iPad. It knows how to interact with that one, writing some input, selecting one of those colorful lines, and doing all those things. So whenever we have to do a test where we'll stop by this page in some flow, this is the class that will be responsible for doing it. So we know exactly where to go look and extend when we have to add new features in our test. And you can see there's no sleeps anymore. I kind of like also how the write price is not only responsible for actually writing the price in the input field, it will also make sure to scroll to the right row in the table view and write the price and hide the keyboard again. So we're kind of putting together the behaviors of the app into methods, so you don't have to do all those things whenever you want to do, just actually playing back one user behavior. So basically we're just encapsulating logic for each page in different classes and trying to maintain a clean code just as we would in every other code. You want to keep your test code just as clean and nice to work in and extend that you would with all the other code, because you're going to write a lot of tests when you start doing this, and you're going to love writing those tests because it's a nice place to be. So after we refactored all this, we thought now we're home safe, everything is going to run stable, and they actually did for a while until we added even more tests. Then we ran into stability problems, which basically comes down to the UI automation, which is beneath it all, and the simulator. They can actually often fail when they're running for a long time, or so it seems to us. They get kind of tired, and then they'll just stop in the middle of a flow and start the next one, and that one might be running well. So we got into a situation where we would look at our test suite that runs nightly. It would have failed. You would go and look and see, oh, it's one of those weird failures we can't explain. We'll run it again, and the next time it will be another test failing, and we haven't changed anything. So to fix this, it's not the best solution, but it's better than having red tests that you don't trust, because you're supposed to trust whenever there's a red flashlight on that big monitor. You should trust that it's a real failure and investigate it and fix it. But we didn't, because we knew that let's just run it again. And Cucumber, as we're using, has a nice little rerun formatter. It's going to collect all the failed tests and run them once again, but only the failed ones. So now we are running less. And this made a huge change. Now I did Google, and I did find a little NUnit retry project on GitHub. I haven't tried it, but I do imagine it can do the same thing. And as I know, the last bullet says you should only actually do this if you start getting into these weird unexplained failures. If it's not a problem for you, then don't do this. Just have in mind that if it starts happening, definitely look into it. You can see the exact date when we implemented the Cucumber rerun formatter, August 11, so 2 months ago. Up until then, I have no idea how many of those red tests were real failures that we overlooked, or if it was just one of those weird, let's go fix it. So, and now, well, they can run green, and now we actually trust them and investigate them. I think it's been said many times, you have to run on real devices as well. Don't trust necessarily only emulator and simulator. And I already showed the cloud. It's doing a great job. And on iOS, now with iPhone 6, we're going to see different screen sizes. We already got the iPad as well, and different OS versions. Now we are in a span of 3 versions, 6, 7, and 8. And we don't really have time to install it on that many devices, testing everything or changing the simulator all the time. So we're making the cloud taking care of this. And again, you already saw it. Maybe this is actually, yeah, this is actually the same test that we saw on the iPad. So again, now you can see the changes in the switch box between 6 and 7. Before you do use the cloud, make sure that you actually have a stable test suite on your own machine. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time trying to run it on real devices. So if you have done all 3 things on the left, you're pretty home safe. You're going to start writing a lot of tests, and it's working really well. But at one point, you're realizing you don't get the rapid feedback anymore, because now it's taking too long to write to run the entire test suite. So the DBA app is the most complex one of the 2 we have, and I believe the whole test suite at night takes about an hour, as it is right now. And the one that the subset that we run, that's what I mean with using different test suites. So we have those, we're using tags in Cucumber. You could use a category in NUnit to specify you want these run after each commit. And that only takes 10 to 15 minutes, which is a fairly fast feedback. You could go grab a cup of coffee and continue doing work, and then you'll eventually get the feedback. So that's one way of optimizing to make sure you only run a subset of your test after the commit, and then run nightly when your server, the server can work while you're asleep. Another thing to do is to make sure that your setup and teardown of your test cases or scenarios in Cucumber, they have to be self-contained. You don't want one test to be dependent on another test I've run before. But the setup and teardown operation sometimes takes a long time to get the data ready for the test. And for that, I think Karl already mentioned earlier as well, there's a nice little feature called the backdoor from the Xamarin UI test. It's the invoke method on the app, or the iApp, where you can invoke any method with a name and specifying a parameter. And what it does, it enables you to invoke logic in your app. It's running, you got the whole context, everything is ready, the simulator is up and running, but you don't have to go through the UI to do it. So it's really great for setting, preparing data, and cleaning up when your test is done. Just make sure that you actually do test whatever you do in the backdoor in some other UI test, so you don't skip doing stuff in your UI test just because it's fast. A couple of examples where we use it. Actually, I think it came up earlier as well. So how in the test cloud do you make sure that one test running on one device doesn't interfere with another device because they're using the same backend? So we do create in our test environment a lot of users. Through the backdoor, we'll create a new user and use that one on that specific test, and then another user on another device. So we use the backdoor to log in and to create listings, putting your dog for sale on DBA. We can do that through the backdoor as well, and then cleaning up any user data afterwards. So a specific example, this one from DBA. I'm logged in as a user, I have things for sale, and now I want to change my description of whatever I'm trying to sell. So first, the test has to log in as this unique seller guy, and then we are creating a listing for, well, it's headphones in Danish, if you didn't know. And then now I want to be on the item page afterwards. And that's actually, from there, the real test starts to verify that I can change stuff. So before we used the backdoor, this took quite a long time. But now the listing is created through the backdoor, and so is the login. And so this is the difference in time. So it actually took, well, the difference is 42 seconds. So it actually took longer to prepare the test to run that the test of what we actually wanted to verify did. So the backdoor can really optimize things. And if we had 10 scenarios creating listings before that, you can multiply it and see we can save a lot of time doing this. So the last thing of these 5 steps that you should definitely consider, we like to do new features on different branches, because that way our master branch is already always ready for uploading to the App Store if needed. But we got kind of lazy because we would make a new branch and then we would have to copy all the jobs on Jenkins, and that wasn't really that much fun. So a lazy developer would eventually start skipping that and only doing the test flight job that could distribute it, and then just cross fingers and pray that whenever you merged it back to master, it wouldn't break anything, and that's by that time you would run the test. So now this is automated on our build server through naming convention. So whenever it sees a branch named starting with feature, it will create all the jobs needed to run the UI test on iPad, iPhone, the test flight build. Actually, right now, on purpose, we don't do feature builds in the cloud, but we could add that if we wanted to. And it's okay for feature branches or builds to be read for a while. I showed you that live as well. Just as long as you might be doing a larger refactoring that you want to push to the server and you know you're not completely done, that's fine. Just make sure it's green before you actually do merge it into master. What did happen prior to this was that we did find bugs way too late after this big merge, and you'll have to go back through history and find out who merged something bad into it. And it could have been implemented like 2 weeks ago. And we still want a branch or not, we still want to always find the bugs as fast as possible. So the final words. Well, basically, I think you should start today doing all this because it's awesome and it's going to just do you so well. We believe that QA is a team effort and team responsibility. We don't trust anyone else to do it, or we don't want anyone else to do it. We want to be able to say, hey, it's our product and we're taking care of the whole life cycle. Also, even though you do this, bugs and crashes will still live in the app. I believe that bug-free software, whether it's apps or websites or anything, they live the same place as Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. They don't really exist, so you just accept it, but you might, well, there's going to be fewer of them. And do not expect starting all this to be effortless to get started, but it will quickly pay off. Well, there's a learning curve if you haven't already started, knowing the query language for getting the UI elements, but there's a lot of good documentation to get started. And then try not to do everything at once. Start in maybe your most risky area, actually, because that would be a great way to start testing that one. And then expand your test cases. And as you expand, you'll start doing more of these page objects. And from then on, it's going to be a lot faster adding new things, because now you got the whole base covered. And you can just pick out new things and put them together in new ways. And you have new test cases. So see it as an investment that's going to give you a much higher app quality and code quality, which is really important, I think, as a developer, because I like clean code that I understand. And if I don't understand it, then I would like to be able to refactor it without breaking a lot of things. It's going to give you a lot more time to focus on new important features that you want to get out to the customers. And those new features, you can now get them out a lot faster with less bugs in them. And the customers are hopefully going to be happy. And happy customers, then you're going to have a happy boss. And happy customers, they like frequent updates, especially if they are of high quality. Otherwise, you'll notice in the App Store right away. You'll have a happy and calm QA, because they will trust this whole test effort as well. One thing I do like about the Cucumber style that we're using is that, well, the whole BDD thing that Karl mentioned, is that our QA can actually read and understand our test cases. She can even go in and write new scenarios, picking the steps that are already there, putting them together in a new way, maybe write a new step, and then come ask a developer, hey, I now wrote this step, could you help me do the actually implementation, how to invoke the app and do what it's supposed to do. And that's really great, and it's a great communication tool as well. Last but not least, happy and brave developers. Well, I'm happy when I work on a clean source code and feeling that I can deliver high quality. And I'm brave because I dare to refactor the code smells that I see occasionally. And that's just great. So I think on that happy note, I hope there will be time for questions if there are any.
I think we should take the time for a few questions. Is there a microphone? Either regarding the eBay process or Calabash UI test or anything you would like to test?
Yes. Could you, there's a microphone right there.
Yes, standing microphones here and here.
While we wait, otherwise I'm going to be around until, well, Saturday, so do come by and ask any kind of questions. I'd like to hear feedback and also get new ideas and inspiration for how we can improve our test setup. So do find me or contact me on Twitter or anywhere else.
You mentioned that you should keep the tests fast. Did you find that there's a happy medium of how much time should be spent running the test before you say, you know what, it's getting to be too slow, we need to come back in and take some of these tests out and do them at a later time, or that, what was the amount of time where you said, this is the bar, when we get over it, it's getting to be too much?
We did keep adding tests until like the half an hour, and then we looked at each other and said, well, half an hour, that's a long time. And then we continued adding more tests, and then when we hit the 40 minutes, like, no, we have to fix this. And then we went down to 10 minutes, which is kind of a good threshold, I think, because it's, you still get, you can run a lot of tests in 10 minutes, especially with the backdoor optimization and all these things. So I would say that that's the amount of time that, that should be in there. I should also point out that whenever we are working on a specific area, we might add more of to the commit build in that specific area while we are working on it. And when it's all good and it's shipped, then we'll remove some of the tests from running after each commit and only leave a few of the tests in that area. But for a period, it's okay to add more tests to the commit run when you're working on that specific area.
Okay. Thank you.
How did you manage the test, like the server-side test data, especially when you were running from Test Cloud? Like, did you go into a test environment or your actual like production servers? Well,
I have a feature request at Karl's desk. Well, we have some challenges with our side ops. They won't allow an open door even from those IP addresses from the cloud. So right now the cloud is running in production to our production environment, which also means that we can't do some of the pavement test and that whole flow, which we would like to, because that's a high-risk area. So for now, we can run the test cloud in the test environment. But we do have a pretty cool setup for our tests. I think we have 7 test environments that we share with the websites for each platform. So and it's mirrored from production each week. So we just have to find a good solution to get an open door from the test cloud to our test environment.
Yeah, we're looking at opening up. They use proxies to access their staging environment. That's what we're looking at doing.
Okay, and then when you are running against like production, did you have any tricks or changes you had to make to your tests to make them, I don't know, less prone to like failing when the production data was different than you were expecting?
No. Well, actually, our test data is the same as in production because it's mirrored each week. What I did find, and that's when I'm looking forward to that recording new feature, because sometimes I see a test that is opening a wrong listing from that doesn't happen in the test environment, because we're showing some listings, some other ads, and they're not in our test environment. That's one of the differences. So yeah, we have seen a few, and I haven't really debugged it that much, because then the next time it's gone. So I'm looking forward to the recording part, but we're really not depending on the data from the server in those ways, because that's why we do that whole setup and tear down. We have to create the listings that we want to keep working on. And if we do a search, we only assert part of the keywords to make sure they don't have an Audi car, for example, that's called something else. So we don't assert all the details. For that, we can do our integration tests, which only run in our test environment if we want to go to that low level.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Niels mentioned he'll be around. I'll be around also, of course. But I'd like to give Niels a hand again for making this presentation.
Thank you.